it also works both ways too. If for some reason you went into an interview and things happen where traffic, you show up maybe a couple minutes late, or they hit you with that question that you may not be expecting, and they come back and they say, oh, so-and-so didn't really, do all that hot. My first feedback is going to say, well, hey, I talked to 2 references. Here's what they said before you jump the gun and say, oh, no, we don't want to bring them on. So it works both ways.
Yeah, we are going to fight for our candidates too. If our client says there's something that we didn't really like about it, we're going to push back on that and try and talk through what we liked about them and why we think they're right for the role. We're not going to just take it, oh, okay. If they say, hey, they didn't come prepared, they had bad energy. If it was bad across the board, it's like, okay, well, I understand. We'll bring somebody else in front of you who fits the bill. But if it's a little thing that worries them, and like we're kind of on the edge for this reason, then we're gonna fight for our candidates. Absolutely, if we stand behind them and think that they would represent us well, then we're going to do anything we can to get them that opportunity.
So we're going to class, make sure they're on time. We're going to ask the professor if you showed up on time. If not, how many days were you late? Same with like the quality of your work. Like you're going to do something, always do it to your fullest, because most of the time they're going to ask and really figure out if this person really put forth the best effort in this class, or if they just kind of get through it because they have to type thing.
And we're going to try, and when we ask those questions, we cover references, we're going to ask as many questions open-endedly as possible, because it's so easy for someone to like, hey, did they work hard? Did they show up on time? Usually, yes. Cool, great. That doesn't really paint a picture of the times they didn't, right? We tell them, like, we'll say, what was the attendance policy, and how did they adhere to that? You know what I mean? Like, we want to get some real quantifiable answers so that we can give that information to our clients and kill whatever doubt that they might have in their mind.
So I think a helpful tip with references, I just give this advice to all students, is one, make sure you ask your references if they're willing to be a positive reference for you. And I would ask them in person or over the phone. That way, if they hesitate at all, you can say thank you and go ask someone else. Because if there's hesitation, they may not give you the best reference. And it may be because they just don't know you well enough to give enough detail, or there's something there. But you always want to ask your references if they're willing to be a reference. And then I also encourage you to share your resume with your references and let them know where you're applying, because you never know who people know. And so if you let them know, hey, I'm applying here, not only does it give them the heads up that, oh, okay, I could be hearing from this particular company or school, but it also, they could say, oh, I know someone who works there or who went to school there. And so it just keeps them in the loop. So I just make sure, and you want to have at least, I know you all normally call back 2, I'd say have 3 that you've asked and have lined up as you're applying for jobs and graduate schools. But please be sure to ask. I've had students list me as a reference. They never asked me. And to get that phone call is very tough because I was not ready and probably couldn't really say much at all. And so just be sure you're doing those things when it comes to references.
Yeah. And to piggyback off that, we do ask for 3 or 4 references in the hopes that once we have 2, once we have 2 called, then it's okay. We feel good about that. We can hold off on the 3rd or 4th unless our client asks for more references. But we typically say at least 2 supervisors or professors, and if you want to throw some peers in there that work next to you, that's okay too. It's not that isn't valid. It's just without the supervisor reference to go with it, then it's your friend could say about you whatever you need to say about you, right?
So, and then y'all feel free to jump in with your questions anytime, but I got a bunch. So, but mine aren't as important as yours are. So cut me off anytime. We've been told a lot lately from Sarah's office, not a whole lot from Sarah, but some. This question, and maybe you have a comment about it from Aerotec's perspective. Students taking classes don't necessarily think of the skills. They think of the things in the syllabus, like the tests, the papers, and due dates, and the content, they don't necessarily think about the skills and helping to make the translation from what they learn in the class to what they'll need in the field. Is that really, from y'all's perspective, a worthwhile exercise for students to do?
Change like the mindset, the way they're thinking about what they're getting out of class. Absolutely. Like we talk about in our interview prep being able to give specific examples of it's easy to say, oh well, we did these labs, or we did all these presentations. All right, well, we basically employ the STAR method, which says like S stands for set the scene, T is what was the task, A is what were the actions you took, and what was the result. Right? So like when you're in an interview, if somebody asks you a question about specific experience you have, don't just say, oh well, I took 2 years of this class and got a lot of great experience in this. You have to come with something specific in what you learned from it, and like what a skill that you gained from it, or something that you took away that made you better. Like it's really important to be able to quantify that in something real. Because if you're just giving generic examples, it just sounds like you're kind of dancing around the question. But being able to give a specific example is really that's what drives it home.
When I look around the classroom here, for example, I see, I don't know what some of this equipment is, but what's that yellow thing back there?
Is that scale?
Scales.
Measuring?
Yeah.
Yeah, being able to read those, read a meter. There's tools and equipment in here that you can say you use and you know how to operate that is applicable, rather than just saying, well, I took an environmental science classes. In my environmental science class, we did lab working with this type of soil, and I use this tool to determine what, I'm sorry, I don't know what that.
No, I hear
Like,
you. I don't understand. This is what I spent 2 years on.
Yeah, but using like the tools, like there's anything you took for measurements, if there's any like chemicals you worked with, like that's hands-on things that you can relate, as opposed to just, I took this class and I got an A+. Or whatever. So,
I have a question for each of you.
Okay.
What is your favorite, and this could be just the most common, it could be the hardest, but what's your favorite example of a question students will get, or graduates will get in an interview? Sarah, do you have one?
Good question.
That is a good question. I think a common one you'll always get, and it can be a struggle for a lot of people, is the tell me about yourself. And so with that, it'll be interesting to hear what you all coach your candidates with as well. But I think, often for us when we get that question, it's kind of like, well, what all do you want to know? Like, do you want my life story? What
Or do you
should
want the
I
elevator
say?
speech, right?
Right, and so, so I normally encourage students to think about 3 kind of main things as a way to formulate your response. So one is I do encourage you to share something personal. So if it's, maybe you're from a particular place and you're really proud to be from that place. Maybe you're from a really big family. Maybe you've been somewhere different and exotic in the world. So really something personal, so that the interviewer can kind of attach to that. But then I would also talk about your interests and skills, and you can specifically target it to the position that you're interviewing for, but you want to make sure that you're talking about the skills that you're bringing, not just like, oh, I'm really excited for this opportunity. Okay, well, that's great, but kind of start to tell me what you bring to the table there. But I do think it's really important to include something personal. You want to remind the interviewer that you're human, and you never know what people will attach to. They could be from that same place. They could have traveled to that particular country. So that's just going to make you stand out all the more. So that's what I say. What are y'all's questions too?
yeah, okay. So I guess the toughest question that you could get that I always prep people on is talk about the time you overcame adversity. That can be personal, it can be classroom related, work related. But the overall goal is you wanna, like Tori was saying, state what the issue was, what you did to overcome it, and the result of it. Obviously, you don't wanna ramble on, you don't wanna get emotional with yourself, but you wanna make sure that it's to the point, here's what I did, here's what the issue was, and here's how I overcame it.
Right. I mean, employers want to know what you can do, but they also want to, like, you grow most when you overcome, like, adversity, right? Like, when you stretch yourself, when you're uncomfortable and how you handle it, that's when you find out who people really are. So they want to hear about times where you felt uncomfortable and what you did to turn a bad situation into a good situation. That's like, if you can do that, then that shows a lot. That's the character that employers want from people. So that's a really good point. I think mine, I'll hit it from a different direction, where a lot of people fall short and where we prep our candidates the most. Because this is something that no one ever really thinks about. They're so worried about answering questions, but the biggest question that you could be prepared for is when the interviewer turns around and says, well, what questions do you have for me? That is your opportunity to show how much how prepared you were, like how I researched your website and I had a question about this. Or what does the training look like? What are the opportunities for advancement in your company? Like, what does the day in the life of this position look like? What do the top performers typically do best or better than the average performers? Like, showing genuine interest in things that you could take into day one and run with is that if you do that well, then that stands out to interviewers more than anything. If you come in and have no questions, you're like, no, I'm good. Like, cool, this person's done.
Yeah.
Like, that's literally, you're not, unless you're just the most perfect technical candidate that they're looking for, typically they're going to be like, this person doesn't care. So that's something a lot of people don't think about, but I always tell people, we always tell people, hey, what questions have you prepared? Please have at least 3 good questions. Don't ask about money. Don't ask, what's the starting salary? Like, the second you ask about money in an interview, you lost them, because they think that's all you care about. And the second you get an offer for something with more money, you're going to leave. Don't talk about, how much vacation time do we get, or how many breaks do I get in a day? Like, they don't want to hear that, and people ask it. It's really frustrating for us because we put a lot of work into getting the right people in front of them, and then they just blow it with something that could have been so easily avoided. And because you can get I'll get those questions answered for you as your recruiter. I'll find out all that stuff. That's my job. But don't ask that in an interview because you're going to lose them immediately. So just really think about good questions. Do your research. Do your homework. And when they ask you what questions you have for me, that's going to be a huge opportunity to make or break that interview.
I got another one.
Bring it.
Can each of you tell us the top 3 things employers are looking for? Now, obviously, if it's an engineering job, they want engineering. But I'm talking about, and I could guess, but I'd rather hear y'all's opinion on what are the traits that are the key 3.
Well, I can tell you what the biggest red flags are, and I think it ties in. If we send a resume over and someone's really job hopping, they've been a lot of different places in the past 5 years. If they've got one job for every year of the past 5 years, then that's going to be a tough sell. Like, we're going to have to really talk about, it was a contract basis. I see it more in construction with like skilled trades because they get hired on for a project and the project's done, they get laid off. So we can talk to that, but typically, job tenure is one. Someone who is shown that they grow with the company, if they haven't just been in one role, but they've moved up, if they've shown that they have the ability to grow and stretch themselves, that's big. And just consistent employment for one. You wouldn't think that'd be a thing, but I definitely have resumes where I'm like, hey, what I see this, it says from 2013 to 2016 you were here, and then from 2006, I don't see anything until 2018. What happened in 2017? And I was like, oh well, I just had some stuff going on. I was like, oh, all right, well, we're gonna have to figure out a way to bridge that gap because that's gonna be their first question. And it doesn't sound like, again, it's something that you wouldn't think that would be a big deal, but in today's world, a lot of people are extremely hoppy and don't have consistent employment. And that if you don't have that, that's gonna really hurt you.